Mo, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for having me. I'm really good to be here.
Fantastic. So, for those who don't know you, how would you best describe what you do?
So, I'm the co-founder of a company called Morto. We're generally speaking focused on helping organizations move out of spreadsheets and documents and into connected data hubs so that they can automate reporting, tracking, planning, and the collection of information. So, we provide a very connected system and a configurable system that helps them automate tracking and reporting off the back of that within processes like information delivery planning and design deliverable planning and tracking and so on and so forth.
And you've got a background that combines civil engineering and entrepreneurship, I guess. Where did your journey in construction begin?
Yeah. So I'll take back. So I did a civil engineering degree by background. Spent time initially doing that, and I always had some level of interest in computing. So I had coded when I was younger. While I was doing the degree, I did internships. So I did an internship with a large contractor in the Middle East, and that was on site. And I then did an internship in design. Came to the conclusion very quickly that neither of those were for me. I just didn't love that type of work personally. Didn't think it's something that I would excel in, and somehow ended up hearing about a department within the same company that focused on information systems and automation for construction projects and for project controls. So my title actually when I joined the company was automation engineer. And I don't see that often. It's now starting to emerge actually in the UK. So like some of the companies we work with now have group automation leads. But fundamentally, the idea of an automation engineer was somewhere between a data person, a BIM person, a systems person, plus automation. And then the goal really was automate reporting, automate processes, make them as efficient as possible. And we use systems to do that. So I ended up doing that for around 3 years. Did it in very large oil and gas projects and in an airport project in Abu Dhabi for a new terminal. And at some point there, even there, had a bit of a crisis, and I was like, "What am I doing? Do I want to stay in the industry?" Ended up leaving to do a master's in Cambridge in engineering for sustainable development, and there came to understand the importance of the industry. So I realized the industry sits at the core of many of the challenges that we face, from things like carbon and sustainability and climate change, all the way down to education, mobility, healthcare, housing. The sector has a massive, massive role in all of our quality of lives. So that made me go, that's really, really important. But the master's focused on policy and management. And I was like, data and digital actually has a very big role to play in making the sector better. So that actually made me want to go back to the sector and go back to what I did when the goal was to leave the sector when I went to the master's. And that got me to go, I want systems. I want to do things in relation to systems and to the digitization of the industry. Went back actually to the company that I was with, but became convinced that there weren't any of the solutions that the industry needs. So there's a lot of talk about, I mean, this is back in, at this point, 2018. Well, the when I went back, it was 2016. Like people were talking about 3D printing, drones, AI, like all of these kinds of things. And I was like, but no one is talking about the basics.
Yeah.
And we need to get the basics right. And we need a true data foundation for the industry. And didn't see any of that. So at some point, I was like, no one is working on the basics and what's seen as the boring stuff. I'll make the jump and co found a company that does that. And the journey started 7 years ago.
Awesome. And if we just park that for 1 second before we kind of dive straight into that, what is the one thing that you wish people outside the construction industry understood a little bit better about our industry?
Well, that's a good one. I think like many people opportunistically jump on the sector. So there's the famous McKinsey digital ranking diagram where we're second last effectively as an industry. And everyone goes, industry hasn't digitized. And someone who comes from tech or something goes, I can solve that, and they just jump right in. I think there are valid reasons for that. Like I'm one of the people who, I mean, there's a lot the sector can get better, but I don't think the sector hasn't digitized because it's lazy. In some ways that, or because people don't innovate, which is in many ways a lot of the rhetoric in the in or the narrative in the tech world. Someone thinks they're very, very smart, they'll come and bring tech magic and solve the industry's problems. I think there are valid reasons why the industry hasn't digitized, I think. And anyone who's going to try to take them on, I think, should be someone who try to deliver projects, try to understand, or try to digitize the industry first. Like I wasn't on site, but I did interact with a lot of the data that we have as a sector. It's a very unique sector. It's a very challenging sector because of the nature of what it does. Like every project is subtly different, and rightfully so. It'll be in a different location. There'll be some requirements that are different. You have a different mix of participants that get involved in doing it. You have like hundreds and thousands and millions of sub processes and processes that all have to interact with each other and all have to work with each other. And that combination of things means it's very hard to give people a very rigid solution that goes and does one specific thing and say, I've solved the industry's problems. So I personally think more, I wish more people take the time to understand the details of processes, not the high level of a process. Planning is broken, or design is broken, or quality control is broken, or whatever that is. Go into the details of the process, understand the interface points between that process and other processes, because that's really, in my opinion, where the industry, where things go really wrong. And I don't see many people from outside of the industry trying to go into that level of detail.
Yeah, I'd agree with you on that massively. I think, personally, as I kind of mentioned to you before when we've spoken, I'm not from construction originally, but I've made it my mission to kind of understand processes. But I think the one thing that you've nailed on the head there is that, you look at a process, whether it be as simple as raising a permit, okay? It can be so different depending on the job and depending on the environment and depending on the size of the business. And when you look at technology and the way in which a platform works, it can actually be quite restrictive for one person, but be really useful for another person. And I think that's one thing I've kind of tried to relay back to companies I've worked for, is that it's not one size fits all. I don't know if that's something you kind of experienced.
No, to your point, and I think it's important to look at how did the industry get to where it is in terms of digital. Roughly what happens is someone goes, permits is a problem for a very specific stakeholder. They go and build a solution around that, and they're like, I've solved the problem. What they forget is that that same process has to interface with many other people as well. So it's not one stakeholder that's involved. So what we generally have as an industry today is many point solutions that have tried to tackle specific workflows for a specific persona. The ones that have managed to scale the most and become biggest are the ones that have probably focused on site, because that's a big enough persona to go after, or things like document management. So you look at the AConnexes, the ACCs, the A sites, it's a relatively large problem that is quite scalable. But then you look at all of the other problems, there is a one person that's doing that workflow, but that person needs to gather data from 50 other people or needs to feed into 50 other people's workflows. And I always say where the industry breaks apart and where every approach when it comes to digitization has broken apart is they haven't taken into account these interface areas and interface points and the need to configure it to meet the other people's workflows. They need something else out of the building permit process, or they need to feed their information in a specific way that fits their processes as well. So I'm 100% with you. I think interface areas is really what's killing the industry personally.
I guess the only other thing I always think of is, so interoperability is a huge topic of conversation, but from a software perspective, I think this will resonate with you. When you're developing software for the industry, where do you think you stop? right? Because there's so many processes, so many different departments that interface together. And you look at some of the providers in the market, and they've, for example, done the CDE fantastically, but then they've tried to branch in and do kind of the field or site operations, and then they've tried to do something else. How do you kind of, I guess, segregate and separate those processes and what doesn't need to be actually connected together? Because ultimately, a technology provider can't actually build everything. It just, it wouldn't be possible because we just don't have the platform, the code, or the developers to do that.
Very hard is the answer. And I think in some ways, I don't know what it is, like maybe greed or something comes into the way and everyone wants to do everything. The way we think about it, at least, like I'm a big fan of this idea of modular best in breed tech stack. So I'll have a combination of software solutions that are each the best at what they do. That's the ideal scenario for any company. I think that's better for us. I think that's better for the client. So the first thing is need to approach it from the beginning that it is going to be an open system and it will coexist with other systems. And the vendor needs to be in that mindset. We're very much in that mindset. We do not want to be a document management solution, for example. We do not want to do anything around site. Like we're very deliberate around these things. We go, companies have asked us to do some things around these, but we go, we will not do these things. What we want to be the best at is any process that currently is standardized and collaborative that typically happens on spreadsheets and on documents and has to interface with other systems. The properties of these things are roughly the same. The personas we're after are people in the office. That could be an information manager, that could be a design manager, that could be a quality manager, it could be a sustainability manager or an asset manager or coordinator for any of the above. But it's someone who's sitting down in an office, which means I'm not optimizing for mobile, for example.
Yeah.
I know that I need to integrate with the other systems. Now, yes, that does also mean we cover hundreds of processes over time, but we're covering hundreds of processes that have very, very similar properties, which are need really good tables, need to be able to split up these tables into views, need to be able to create charts, need to be able to link these tables to other systems. These trackers link them to other systems like ASite or ACC or Aconex or P6 or any of these systems. And then ideally we can put these trackers within a document context to create something like an EIR, an information management report, a BIM execution plan, a health and safety file, an O&M manual, and so on and so forth. So I think it's about being deliberate, figuring out who you want to go after and what serves them best, and just actually wanting to build a product that is best in class. Like we're not just trying to capture everything. We think we have a very big market to go after, but what we're after is being the very best at solving the tracking, planning and documentation problem and integration problem at scale, and to do that for a range of personas. We don't need to get into everything else. There are other solutions that will be better than us at the geometry bit. So when someone comes and says, add in a model coordination system, I'm like, you already have 50 on the market that are all really, really good. We're not going to add any value beyond these. So I think it's a mindset more than anything else. And it's really wanting to deliver a best in class product, which I don't think many vendors have that. Some do. I'm not saying not everyone doesn't, but I think many come at it with the attitude of, I want to make money purely, and I do want to make money, but like we do want to build a huge business, right? But the mindset is solve the problem and be the best at solving that problem. And if we do solve that problem, we become a huge business. Whereas most of it come at, I want to make money. I've now seen an opportunity arise in site or in model. I can now upsell that client slightly. So I'll also do that. And they're not deliberate around how they're building their product. They're just trying to do everything that they can.
Yeah, you got to solve the problem first, and then the money will follow, right? You started your early career at Consolidated Contractors Company over in the Middle East. What were some of the biggest operational challenge you saw with projects there, especially around information flow and collaboration that I guess led you to, I guess, where you are today?
Yeah. Silos is the word I'd use. So it's interesting. Like you look at all of the workflows within the industry, and we're all duplicating some variation of the same work that has happened elsewhere. And I think where I was personally very lucky is I worked with the estimation department, I worked with the procurement department, I worked with the budgeting and cost control department, I worked with the quality control department, with the planning and progress monitoring department. And you'd go to each of these and you'd see them making a data set. You'd be like, why are you doing it? It was there. I'd be like, no, no, I just have to make it. And they make that data set from scratch. And then you're basically seeing that 20, 30, 40% of their time is just being wasted on duplicating things that already exist elsewhere. And then to top it off, that adds risk because then there is risk that the data is going to be inconsistent. So not only am I wasting time, but then I'm less efficient. But then I'm actually adding more risk to the project because we each tell a slightly different story about what's happening in the project. So for me, that was really, really important. I think I like taking something like progress monitoring as an example. Let's get a like I actually came at all of this with a project controls background. So I had nothing to do with core BIM or information management. It was how do we control for cost? How do we control for time? How do we control for the quality of the project? And we had a progress monitoring system, so you always have something like P6, you'll a planning system, P6 or ASTA, you'll have a budgeting system, you'll have somewhere to submit payments based on the bill of quantities, and so on and so forth. For every one of these functions, there was a team. So the project we were on was an $800 million project, so it wasn't a small project, but we had 11 progress controllers that would all planners and progress monitoring engineers. What they would all do is they would go to site and check what got built on site. And they would ask that site engineer to fill something for them. You then had the quantity surveyors. They needed to submit payment applications to the client based on the bill of quantities. And again, to get that, they needed to understand what work got completed. So they'd also go on site and they check what work got completed. That was another 11 people. So each of them were football teams, was what I would say. Then I'm not big into football, but like basically feels like we're there. then you had a group in budgeting and cost, also did for something very, very similar. And you had a group in quality control that by default, if I'm checking work and I'm passing inspections, work has been completed. So it felt like there were 40 people that were roughly all doing some variation of I'm going to go on site and check what work completed to then report for a different aspect of the project.
Yep.
And to me, that's a massive problem because what would happen is they take that data at a different point in time. They'd add more burden on the site person who'd then have to fill in these different things. They'd add more risk. They're wasting time, yada, yada. So for there are many different instances with which the same thing happens. You look at estimation to budgeting, a lot of data would get lost along the way. You get to the project, data gets lost again, and people have to recreate that. So for me, it was the silos and having to duplicate the same work, often in spreadsheets again, and that puts projects at risk. It decreases visibility. It means people are wasting time on doing low value adding tasks, and I think that's really the biggest problem that we have in the industry. It's everything in the middle. And if you look at digital today, we've digitized specific processes. So we're better at designing, we're better at inspecting, we're better at receiving material. We're
Yep.
better at delivering design into a document management system. We're better at coordinating design somewhere. But that coordination of all of the work that has to happen to make a project get delivered on time and on budget, that's the bit that's absolutely broken with a million people duplicating work in between. So to me, it was silos, and how do we get out of silos is the big question.
And was there a point where you realized and you went, this just isn't sustainable? I need to do something about this.
I don't know if it was a specific point. It was a build-up in conviction of there needs to be a better way to do it. I was also fortunate. So I was working, my mentor was the chief information officer of the company. So I spent time on site. I then moved to the headquarters of the company. And within that, my mandate was working with him to document best practices for use of data across the group. And I was very lucky because the company had oil and gas, infrastructure, buildings, like we had every sector. Basically, we worked in 40 plus countries. So I got a first-hand view at data from all of these different places. And given my age at the time, like that was just, I was really, really lucky in the exposure I got. As I was doing that, I became convinced coordination was the problem. And I don't mean coordination in the BIM sense of coordination. I mean like true coordination between work that has to
Yeah.
happen across different functions. We were trying to solve these problems to a degree with the CIO because we were building our own in-house software. But I thought there were some things that could be done a bit differently. Personally, I think developing software within a contractor is very difficult. And I'm seeing more companies do that within the space now. Like more companies are going, I'm going to deliver my own software.
Yeah.
The incentives are not there. Like I, as a software vendor now, I have to work really, really hard to get buy-in. And there is no lock-in for companies with what we do and what we say. And I thought that mechanic of trying to do that internally within a contractor was almost set up to fail to begin with. So I didn't like that. And then the real trigger point was I was building that conviction throughout. This is a very big problem. I don't think us building our in-house software is what solves it. And then the one that really got me was when we started establishing the innovation and R&D arm of the company. I spoke to a lot of startups. So I surveyed around 100 startups in the market. I spoke to a bunch of these startups. And yeah, as I said earlier, there was everything from IoT to 3D printing to AI, and every single one of them was making the pitch. I am going to solve the industry's problems, all of them. Or like they make it sound like that problem is the biggest problem. And I was like, no, I get that schedule risk is a big problem for a planner, but projects don't break because schedules aren't done right. They do because we don't track them well and we don't coordinate well within the project. I get that 3D printing would make certain types of projects a bit more efficient. I get that. So same goes with drones. I get we'd make surveying better and more efficient. But that coordination and tracking problem, no one seemed to be solving. And I was just like, okay, I've gathered enough experience. I was 25 at the time. If there is a time, I think I know what the solution should, well, I think I know what the problem is. I didn't know what the solution would be. Rather than sitting down and going, they're not solving it, let me go and give it my best shot. And then I was like, let's make the jump, have nothing to lose at this point. I felt like I had enough of an understanding of the industry because I had played around with the data of all of these things and I had spoken with so many people. But I also was not ingrained in how the industry thinks. And I think that is important. So I think it is important to understand, but I think it's also important to not get stuck in this is how we do things. And I felt like I was at that right point to make that jump, which then turns out I was also quite naive and learned a lot along the way, but 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 we're still around, so I guess we did something right.
Yeah, it's very easy to get lost in the weeds, I guess. So you've got to kind of take a global view of the whole scenario. Let's talk spreadsheets. They're everywhere in construction. What's the problem with relying so heavily on Excel? I know you mentioned kind of data accuracy and data consistency earlier, but what's so the problem with relying so heavily on Excel, Word, and email for project management?
Yeah, I think fundamentally, let's start with what do companies need? Companies need visibility. If I'm a company, if I'm the CEO of a company, I want to understand how my company is performing. Am I delivering all of the design I'm required to deliver? Am I meeting the requirements that I need to meet in order to get paid? How are my teams performing? How's my supply chain performing? Am I within budget? So I had estimated that this would cost me this much. Is it and price it on that basis? Is it costing me that? That's step one. Those are the things I need to have visibility over. Ideally, I want to be doing the work as productively as possible, so I need to be measuring that productivity, right? That's the very top level of a company. It's also on a regional level or on a functional level. If I'm a design director, I have more detailed questions. If I'm a project manager or a design manager on a specific project, I also have similar questions, right? And ideally, for every single one of these, they need to have the visibility that they need in order to be able to intervene and make sure that their project is on track. I think that's by far one of the biggest challenges. I'm not saying it's the only challenge, but it's one of the biggest challenges in the industry right now. Now, that is very important because if I know that something is starting to go wrong, I can intervene and I can course correct and I can help put the project back on track. So I need to know that something is going wrong for me to be able to do something about it. Now, to get that report, what usually happens is I need every function within every project has spreadsheets to track that work. So let's take a very simple example. If someone is in the information management world, master information delivery plan is one. If I don't even have 19650, every company and every project in the world has a design deliverable tracker. So let's talk about that. That design deliverable tracker will have a list of the files that are meant to be delivered. To get that list of files that are going to be delivered, supply chain members need to input into that. And they need to go, this is the design that I'm going to deliver. The first problem that I have in Excel is I can't control the input that's coming in, which means I can get inconsistent data, which then means it's very difficult to actually analyze that data. So the first key thing is it's a free-for-all in Excel. It's very difficult to enforce consistency, which then means reporting will not be great because I have inconsistent data. The second thing is Excel was never built for collaboration. And while there is, yes, we do have cloud like a 365 and we have it in the cloud now, it's not built for 50 companies to come in and plan with each other. Like it's just not designed for that. It's designed for me as an individual to do something on an ad hoc basis more than anything else. I can't, and that's the reason why everyone splits these things into different sheets because they don't want one person to be able to edit another person's data. So they go, I'm going to split them up into different sheets. And then they need to retroactively aggregate these, but also there are things like dependencies between the different areas of work. So ideally, we should be working in a single place. It's just Excel was never designed for collaboration across parties. So that's the second problem. The first is I'm collecting inconsistent data. The second is I can't, it's very difficult for people to collaborate on that. The third is I then need to take that, every one of these Excel files and feed them into my Power BI in one way or the other. And that's again a manual process. And the fourth, which I think is of equal importance, is we've just described the planning phase. Then I've delivered the work in A-Site, A-Connects, or in any of these systems, or ACC, or ProjectWise, or SharePoint, and Dalux, and like the list goes on. Someone today needs to manually go into these systems and pull what has happened. This design deliverable got uploaded at this date by this person and this version and this status and so on and so forth and feed that back into that Excel file. And they need to do that at least on a weekly basis. And that's a very manual process. Ideally, this kind of thing should be happening daily so that we have a real-time view of how the project is progressing. So Excel doesn't allow us to do that because it doesn't link nicely with any of these other systems. So to me, it comes down to Excel doesn't support consistent. Ultimately, the big problem is we need visibility. For visibility, we ideally want real-time connection to true databases that can enforce consistency, that can support collaboration between parties, and that can automate things like tracking by connecting to other systems and automating analysis. Excel is just not set up for any of that. It's much better at ad hoc rather than standardized and collaborative and automated data collection. So I just focused right now on one workflow, planning and tracking, one workflow, design deliverables. Now, let's take that for a second and from the perspective of a multidisciplinary design firm, what does that mean? Usually, I'll have other data sets and other things I want to control for. So one thing I'd want to control for is how much should I get paid? So I'll usually have a schedule of my items and the rates that I had set for what I'm going to be delivering for that client. Someone will manually usually go and ask for, or will have to pull it in from the spreadsheets and go and calculate, this is how much I should get paid. That's a silo on its own. You'll then have another person who's tracking quality and requirement against the and requirements. And that's another siloed process on its own with another spreadsheet. And then you'll have someone else, for example, tracking work packages or design packages, and that's happening in another Excel-based tracker. What Excel is not good at is connecting these different trackers with each other. So once we go out of that function, so yeah, there are silos in the data collection because there are 50 parties that are involved in this. But then even within that, once I have that function, let's assume that was all great. Ideally, that needs to connect to all of the other functions because that design deliverable tracker is the most important thing when it comes to payments and commercial, when to the evidencing that requirements are being met, even to things like demonstrating Building Safety Act compliance or compliance to BREEAM and so on and so forth. So generally speaking, I think what the biggest issue is the fact that we end up having to duplicate that information in one way or the other or reprocess it in a different way to meet the needs of another function. And Excel is not very good at that. So if we're actually collecting standardized data, if we're using relational databases or databases, generally speaking, we can start connecting these different functions together and building relationships between their data sets so that we automate more processes and so that we drive more consistency between them.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. If you're enjoying the show and want to keep up with all the new episodes, make sure you hit that follow button. Subscribing means you'll never miss out, and it really helps more people find us too. If you like what you hear, drop us a quick like or a rating. It goes a long way. We've got loads more great conversations and insights coming your way, so stay connected, stay subscribed, and let's keep this journey going together.
What was the problem statement? You've obviously mentioned, I think, 3 or 4 different problems, but when you founded Mortar, out of those problems you've highlighted, which was the one that was like, this is the one I'm going to solve?
I think the thing is at the core, they all come from a deeper technical problem, which is silos, right? And data just not being lost. So if you look at our name, the reason we called ourselves Morta is we think mortar has always like binds the industry together as the material, and we think data has the potential to do that as well. And we think if we can bind the industry with data, bind supply chains with data, and have smooth information flow, we get to better decision making, better visibility, we get to more productivity, and so on and so forth. So the actual, it was more of a, in a way, it was a technical. And I have the slide when I'm presenting. I go, we talk about productivity, we go about handover, we talk about carbon, we talk about trust and accountability. Many of the people look at that as the problem. We see them as symptoms to a deeper problem, which is data silos and teams being in reactive mode due to these data silos. So for me, it's beating out silos. And if we do that, that's the root cause. That then solves the visibility problem. It solves the productivity problem. It solves the inconsistency problem. It solves the tracking problem. But it was a quite a technical problem statement. And yeah, we're big believers that making data accessible and making sure it flows has the potential to bind the industry together and as a result we can deliver projects and govern projects better.
Do you think um, the Excel addiction, so to speak, can be cured, and does your software do that? or do you think it's something that is going to continue to live and exist, but may phase out over time? What's your kind of view on that?
That's a good question. If you asked me 7 years ago, I would have said yes, it will go away. If you ask me now, I will say no, it will not. But I think it's not that it won't go away. It's whoever is trying to take it on needs to be quite deliberate in how they do. So I don't think Excel needs to go away generally. I think Excel needs to go away where I have a standardized process that requires multiple parties and that interfaces with a wide range of other systems. So for mission critical processes, yes, I think Excel does go away. For ad hoc processes, I think Excel was designed for that. And nothing will ever beat the flexibility, the level. While we are a flexible solution, we're not as flexible as Excel. Like that's too much flexibility in our minds. So for ad hoc processes and ad hoc analysis, I can see Excel and just mocking up a process at the very beginning, I can see Excel being good at like continuing there. Don't know, there's AI right now and there are question marks over some of these things, but like I think ad hoc it stays. Mission critical it goes. Collaborative and standardized it goes, which by default is when it's mission critical. Then the question becomes, how do you make it go? What you said is it's an addiction, and it is an addiction. It's like a drug. And you need to wean people off the drug. And to do that, you need to pick the right places to do that, where there is enough pain from Excel that people are willing to change. So no one wants to fill a bloody tracker with what work has been completed in Connects or an ACC or an A-Site or in any of these systems or in Viewpoint and so on and so forth. They are willing to look at other options at that point. So you go for the thing that you know that they hate, which is tracking, and you show them that that thing they used to spend the day of their lives on can go. And then they're like, actually, I'll go through some pain to change my behavior so that I don't have to deal with the weekly pain of spending a day of my life exporting Excels, importing Excels, doing lookups and creating charts all over again. So it's being deliberate around where we go in. I think before we were far less deliberate, like us as a company. But I always encourage anyone who's trying to take on problems like this, like be very, very specific around the places where there is enough pain so that people are willing to move away. And as they're doing that, you're weaning them off that drug. And then you can go, there are other things that I can also do. I can actually generate a Building Safety Act compliance statement off the back of this. And I can do my design responsibility matrices and if I do it in the same system, I can link them up and I have even less work to do. So it's a gradual process. It doesn't happen in a day, but we are seeing it happens. We're doing it with many large companies. We're on, like with companies like here, we're live on 40 jobs. We are doing it but I don't think it just happens like that, unfortunately. I think it is a process of people have been conditioned to use something and are addicted to using something, in your words, and it is getting them off that, and it's finding the ways to get off that. Another example is we've seen reporting as a very big thing. So now we're going, let us show you that we can automate reporting very, very quickly off the back of your existing data. And then they go, oh my God, I don't have to do this. I don't have to do this report again that I would have spent X number of hours a week. I wouldn't have been able to do that on Excel. And actually now I get it daily and I need to do less work. So it's a gradual process, but it does work.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most rewarding parts of what I do is when you show somebody a process like reporting is a very, very common one, particularly with what we do as health and safety. You kind of show them a report that takes them, potentially 2 or 3 days a month or longer to compile. And you say, yeah, well, it's automatically there and you just have to click the button up there to get it out of the system. For me, that's
100%.
the most rewarding parts. Are there, compared to when you started 7 years ago, are the issues still fundamentally the same, or has anything really changed, in I guess, to 2025?
The issues are the same. I think the landscape is a bit different. I still think we're dealing with silos as an industry. I think we have much more clarity on what needs to happen. I think certain types of companies, at least, have much more clarity on what they need to happen because they've tried out different solutions and they know what they want more, is what I'm seeing. They get the buzz of digital twins and like they get buzz. More and more companies get buzz and they are not full for bullshit. And I think that's a good thing. Like especially the top end of the market has awareness, is educated, is actually very, very smart and very, very sophisticated, and they can tell one from the other. There is more and more consensus around we need a data foundation and we need to be looking at how to connect that data. There may be different approaches, and rightfully so, different companies will think different approaches are the right approaches, but I think there is more consensus around that. I think there are enough players that have been burnt by trying to build their own solutions that they're actually trying to stop reinventing the wheel. But almost it looks like every company needs to try it out on its own, get burnt, and then it will move on. So the most mature end of the market have already been through that journey. So and they're finding their way. The reason I say the landscape is different is because it is, yes, we do have the same issues and we are still responding to, and we're just beginning. Like there is a lot that has to be, there are hundreds and thousands and millions of these spreadsheets, as I mentioned, in data silos for every single workflow and every single sector. So that there's a lot to go at. When I say sector, I mean verticals within construction, like infrastructure, water utilities, like housing, and so on and so forth. The Building Safety Act is just another example of something that is getting people to think about these things. And I think that's where the landscape is different. We have more legislative drivers, which are making people more aware of things. I think AI is actually a massive opportunity. I think people getting exposure to ChatGPT and going, how can I do that and use something like that in my business, is making more and more people acknowledge the importance of connected, robust data that underlies all of that. And that's actually making the silos conversation more important. So the landscape and the awareness is different. The challenges are largely still the same, even though some companies are making very good progress in terms of solving them already.
From an AI perspective, and this wasn't actually something I was going to talk to you about, but I think it's important because you've raised it quite a few times. Where do you see AI really being helpful? Because we as a business had a conversation internally, and we've got a lot of people from industry, and I think there's obviously a massive opportunity with AI to improve the way we work, but finding something that is truly useful is sometimes you, like a software provider you mentioned, will just create AI to say, yeah, we're now AI powered, rather than actually creating it to solve a specific issue. What do you think, from your experience and what you're seeing, AI is really going to do for construction?
I've two things. First, anyone who knows me knows I'm not like very into buzz, so I'm not jumping on anything for the sake of AI. But I think where it does get interesting is there's a lot of boring administrative work that people have to do that AI can take away. That's the high level. Like I'm less looking at the glamorous stuff. I'm just looking at the fact that something as boring as someone currently needs to go into a drawing, pull out data from a drawing, and tabulate that data, and then cross-check it against another data set. It's very boring, but it's a workflow that someone has to do. Classification, another one, boring, but has to happen. Someone needs to send a follow-up to that person and tell to that supply chain member, and usually someone would need to do that and go, you're about to be late in inputting certain data that I need you to input. Again, that can be automated. We can have a debate over whether all of the things I described are truly AI or not. They're definitely agentic, like they're agents, but they're rule based or not. Like they're agents. I think there are levels then with which this whole thing gets smarter, and that's more where we'll have impact. There is then the use of LLMs can make certain of these tasks, like some of these tasks, better. But fundamentally, I start at it with the boring, and if we can remove all of these boring things, and administrative things that no one really wants to do and put projects at risk. We've removed 30% of workflows and given people back time that they can do more interesting things. That's at its core. So that's the first area I think of. The second is, I think, learning has always been a problem within the industry. Like, different project participants learn, and but I don't have an organizational brain, so to speak, for a function. I think the equivalent of that, learning and knowledge management for everything that isn't like for tacit knowledge, like I think that's a real area where AI can have an impact. And then the last is like forecasting. So I'd look at these three areas, but I'm someone who goes, the first step is deal with the boring, whereas most people will focus on the very high level, super exciting stuff, or adding a chat interface or like any of that. I don't. I think there are benefits to that. Like we've added an Ask More to AI, but I don't think that's where the profound impact is going to be. I think the profound impact is every person who has a mini workflow. If you can take away 20 to 30% of the things they don't like, that's really where we can add value today, not 2 years from now, today.
Yeah, I'm really glad you said that, because I think that things I have personally seen is that yes, AI is fantastic. It's a buzzword. I think the future is definitely that. But there's so many issues that are fundamentally data related that can be solved without AI before we can allow AI to actually work in a way that's beneficial. There's just, like you said, some people work on spreadsheets, so many people are still working on paper. There's so many workflows that are broken, duplication of data, and I think they need to be fixed first before we can actually go and make AI useful for us as an industry. Just a question kind of around, I guess, Mortar. What's been the biggest kind of surprise to you in terms of, the software itself and in maybe ways it's being used that you didn't necessarily expect when you first started out?
So the beauty of what we've done, I think when we were speaking earlier, I told you like we can be compared to an Airtable, a Notion, a Monday.com, a Smartsheets, like these types of solutions. Which then means people can build on Morta whatever they want in many ways. They can track and document whatever they want. What I love is that because I get on a job, I meet one of our community members, and they share with me something that they've done. In the last few 2 weeks alone, I've been on calls where I've heard about people managing their business on Morta. So I'm going, what makes us very unique is the focus on very unique construction processes like design, deliverable trackers, inspection trackers, material trackers. That's where we really differentiate. But that doesn't mean that's all companies and people can use us for. So I was on a call with an SME the other day, an SME consultancy who uses the platform to manage their and track their invoices, their payments, their contact books. So they're using it as a CRM, their projects, and so on and so forth. I was on another call with a tier one. They're using Morta to track health and safety related incidents and to track building work permits actually on the platform. I don't have that in our templates. We don't have that in our templates. They've just built it. I was on a call with someone who's tracking their newsletters on the platform and their marketing content on the platform. The reason I mention these are the ones I never imagined, to be honest. Like I'm very fixated on connecting data within a construction project and like the very, very core of what makes up a construction project. I've had people show me resource planning. I've had someone the other day walk me through how they're evidencing competence on top of the platform. So there are all of these things where the most shocking one that well, shocking, but also made a lot of sense that I saw from one of the top design firms is they built an asset data catalog on top of the platform, and they've linked that into Dynamo and to a Grasshopper and to Open Roads to automate design information production off the back of data on the platform. Again, didn't I could see it happening, but I never saw it at the same time.
Yeah.
And the really cool thing is I get on a call, and that's why I really take issue with people who say the industry doesn't innovate. The industry does innovate. They've always innovated with Excel. They've innovated with what they've been given. I think it's actually a very innovative industry. Like, people solve problems every day on projects. I just don't think people have had the tool sets that they needed that gives them the flexibility to innovate from a digital perspective. And what makes my job really interesting is I meet a lot of people who do that day after day. And actually, just a shout out, because, well, just do the plug. We have a community day coming up in on the 14th of November. That we do that yearly to celebrate our anniversary. This will be our 7th year. And there we pick stories of people who have done something very different and unique use cases that we have not imagined and seen, and we think the community itself can learn from. So we have that. We have a hackathon where we're going to put out challenges. We have 22 judges from across the industry that will put out challenges related to information management, sustainability, building safety and design, data and AI, and we're going to see what people come up with. Yeah, what surprises me, the short answer to your question is people can innovate. It doesn't surprise me, I get it, but at the same time, it's the nicest thing to see when you get on a call and someone's like, I built this and you don't have this use case and you should be thinking about it. Like, oh, nice.
What's next for Malta? What's the next kind of big thing? Obviously, I appreciate you've gone and share too much, but what's the next big thing you guys are working on?
Yeah, I think a range of things. So we're in the stage where we're scaling with a lot of companies. So we had spent years, I would say, building the right foundation for our product. Over the last 2 years, we've been used on projects. This year, we really started scaling across tier ones, across multidisciplinary design firms. We're on every one of their jobs. So one of the biggest things right now is we're scaling across the likes of Kier, across the likes of Waits, across the likes of McDonald, and so on and so forth. And that's taken a lot of our focus. Like, we take that very, very seriously. So that's very important. The second is going beyond, like, getting people to do more with information management. So the theme of the hackathon is, you already have an information delivery plan. How can that be used for sustainability or for building safety or for design? So going beyond the BIM people using information management tools to, we're all effectively information managers in one way or the other. The third is we're doing a lot more in infrastructure and in nuclear and in like the mega jobs. We already have a lot of mega jobs, but we're focusing a lot more there. And the fourth is AI. So where, when I was describing where I see agentic AI like playing a role, these are things that are basically already there on our end, and we're starting to showcase, and we'll be demonstrating that for the first time properly in the community day, so people can have a peek at what we think is the future and the present of information management in many ways if people want to start.
Also, and if people want to get involved with Malta, you obviously got that event coming up on the 14th. How'd they best do that?
Yeah, so visit our website, www.morta.io. There's a link to the event, or you can find it on LinkedIn. If you have any questions, you can always email me, mo@morta.io, and like, very happy to answer any questions myself. But yeah, we'd love for people to join us. Please do join the hackathon. It's free. We have an academy before the hackathon to like educate people on how to use the platform, and we're trying to gamify collaboration as an industry and do something different. So we just love to have as many people join us as possible.
Lovely. I've got some closing questions for you, which I tend to do with the guests, and I always make them specific to them. So just give me an answer, either or. So first one is plan hard or adapt fast.
Adapt fast.
Spreadsheets or email.
Oh God, email. Email stays. Spreadsheets go.
Custom workflows or standard processes.
Ooh, I'm stuck. Standard, but needs to be configured to meet the particulars of the industry. So I think there is a balance in between, and I think we need a balance in between.
Tech that fits now or tech that scales later.
You should do both. But at the end of the day, you should build tech that fits now for the future that will exist 10 years from now as well.
I've got a good fun one lastly. Bricks or mortar?
A mortar. That's definitely a mortar. The bricks need to work together,
Yeah.
so you need the mortar, and the mortar is more important for that.
What's the just lastly, what's the legacy you hope to leave in the construction industry?
Just empowering people to get their job done as efficiently as possible. I think that's what's very important for us. What is, again, like the coolest thing about what we do is you get to see people solving their own problems, and they're the stars of the show. They're the ones that get the awards, they're the ones that get the recognition, they're the ones that get their promotions. I'm seeing people get jobs because they've built stuff on Morta. I've seen people get promotions and awards, and I think that's really, really cool. The idea that we can empower people to solve their own problems and to make the industry better. I think that's how the industry's problems get solved, not by us trying to solve everything. So all we're trying to do is give people the tools, sometimes give them some of the know-how, and support them so that they can solve their problems. And if we do, I think that that's what really solves the industry's problems. And ultimately, that's what helps us. Like, that's why there's a community. We want to break apart from the silo. We need to share. We need to learn from each other. And we need to do it as a community, which is why there's a very big community ethos around what we do. But empowering people. Like, if we empower the professionals to build their own tools and their own digital solutions, I think that's what solves the industry's problem.
Mo, thank you so much for coming on today. It's been really, really insightful conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks. And actually loved the round at the end. Thanks.